Hey guys, today we're going to discuss in detail how to build your own skirts. And why would you even want to build your own skirts? You'd want to build your own skirts if you can't find the combinations that you're looking for to match the hatch or whatever bait that it is in your body or water, depending on the watercolor and the available forage there. So you can just use any old skirt, that you buy with the lures that you have, or buy packages of pre-made skirts if they suit you, and a lot of times they will, but a lot of times they won't suit you. And I do a lot of custom colors on my jig skirts, especially, not so much on my spinnerbaits and chatterbaits, but on my jigs I like to do custom colors because we have a lot of different types of bodies of water that we fish with different types of forage in it. And I personally don't like to throw the exact same thing that everybody else is throwing. Not that it doesn't work, but sometimes I think it might give me a little bit of an advantage. So you've decided you want to build some skirts for your jigs, spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, whatever. What do you need? You need a pair of scissors. You need some collars. These collars come in white or black or clear. White for your spinnerbaits and chatterbaits and swim jigs, and then black for your flipping jigs or your darker stuff. Some jig heads, some brown, some green pumpkin, and some black. Black being the most used. Then you're going to need some skirts. I buy these skirts from two places personally. You can get them a lot of places. I buy them from either Tackle Warehouse, or I buy them from Barlow's Tackle, which is a distributor of lure making components. Here's a catalog for them. I'm not promoting them, I'm just where I get them. And then you need some type of skirt making tool. Now this is a low production skirt making tool. This is not something, if you're in the jig making business, you probably wouldn't use this. It's too slow. But it's simple, it's easy to store. And if you're going to make your own jigs, it'll make all the jigs that you need to make. So what do you want to do first if you're making a jig? First, you've identified, in my case, I want to build a darker jig, black jig head, with a black and blue base. There's a black blue fleck base. And I could just put one or two of them together. One for a smaller jig, faster falls, two for bigger jig, bulkier jigs, slower falls. In my case, I'm going to use a layered jig. And I like layered jigs because I think they look more real. And in this case, I'm going to experiment with black and blue. And then I'm going to throw a pad of green pumpkin blue. And then I'm going to throw a pad of this light blue on the top or the bottom, depending on how you're looking at it. Dark, less dark, lightest. Always layer it, that way, darkest to lightest, if you're doing it. So then you'll have put a collar on here. If you're building a lot of jigs, you'll load this up, 5 or 6 or 7 collars preloaded. You'll wet the end of this point, slide your collar on here so it's ready to go. Then you're going to pull the point off. Just comes off. And you're going to take your little hook tool here, insert it through the same side that the collar is coming off on, and then you're going to hook it into the 3 pads or however many pads that you decided to use. And then you're going to just pull that through, all the way through. I like to pull it through until the other end just disappears here. That puts me right about where you want to be. Now if you're making a finesse style jig, you're not going to pull it all the way through because you'll want less material one side of the collar as on the other side of the collar. And you can make that adjustment after you've done it. So then you're just going to slide this collar off the end, trying to do it one hand here, on the end of this right onto the skirt that you just made. And then you're just going to pull it out. Now it looks kind of like that. So what you do next is you're going to adjust your collar where you think you want it. In my case here, because I'm making a flipping type jig, I want the collar pretty much in the center. So I'm going to get it close to the center as I can. And then you're just going to take the ends here, which are connected, and you're going to cut the ends off. Not trying to make any particular length right now. You're just cutting the ends off. And just cut the ends off straight with a pair of scissors. And now you have that jig skirt. So then I'm going to mount this onto this particular jig. This is just a Boss jig head. And we'll just slide it up on there and see how it looks. And I'm going to keep the dark side to the top and the light side to the bottom. The dark side is going to be like all bait. The back is almost always darker than the belly. So you want that to look that way on your jig. And the top will be obviously where the weed guard is. And the weed guard adds, on a black jig anyhow, the weed guard adds a darkness to the top of that jig, you know, which is realistic. So then you're looking at your jig and you're like, okay, what do I want to do next? Now for me, unless it's really, really dirty or muddy water or dark, I'm always going to trim my skirt. And so I'm going to take the skirt and lay it in my hand, and I'm going to take the scissors and start at the longest point on the back, and on an angle, I'm going to cut just underneath the hook about 1/4 of an inch. So then if you were to lay that down, well, let's do it like this. The back tails out a little bit farther than the front does. And that blends in your trailer is what that does. And see, you're still not quite done. You might be done with some jigs, but not this jig. And on this jig, it's shipped with an extremely long weed guard. Never fish it with a weed guard that long. So that weed guard also needs to be trimmed. And I like to just pinch it flat. And I like to start at the barb of the hook and cut it to about the front of the hook on an angle. And see, that's what I have. So now that covers to the barb of the hook on the long part, but on the short part it doesn't go as far. Now you're still not done, but maybe you're done. If you think you're going to use this jig in really heavy cover, I'm probably going to leave that weed guard alone, because I need as much protection from the heavy cover as possible. If I'm not fishing in heavier cover, less cover, then I'm going to spread that weed guard out. I'm going to bend it out each way, right from the head, so that it looks more like that. And what that does is that allows a better penetration of the hook through the weed guard instead of it all being ganged up right over top of the hook. And then if, you know, sometimes you get weed guards that are softer, sometimes you get them that are harder. If you feel like your weed guard is too hard, doesn't push down easy enough, then you can mash down, just mash down on that, you know, 6 or 8 or 10 times, and that softens that, loosens that up a little bit. And now you're ready to go fishing with your new jig and see if that jig works as good as in your mind you thought it might. And for me, this situation here, if I saw a jig like that, I would go, that's a stained water jig, not necessarily a dirty water jig, but it should work in it. And that jig would also probably work in clearish water, you know, and then you would just modify your trailer based on the time of year, you know, something active for hot water, something less active for not hot water, something straighter for more bait fishy, something with a lot of action for more bluegill or swimming type things. So that's how you build a jig. Go out and try it. It'll improve your game if you got something that not everybody else is throwing. And again, I thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.